We do have Brian from MSS here with us, so he is our expert on third-party services. We also have Carrie and Linda from operations with us, Andrea from the Move Center, and then Judy Butler and myself. So again, thank you everybody for joining, and I'm going to turn it over to Brian.
Well, thank you, Katie, Judy, and everybody. Again, my name is Brian Schaefer. I'm with MSS, Mover Specialty Services. We provide specialty services to the likes of Stevens, and we've been doing work with you guys for a very long time, so we appreciate the opportunity to get in front to talk to you guys today. Was asked to come here and talk a little bit about some of the services that you and your surveyors and crews may be running into out there on the road that currently you might be handling yourselves, which is all fine and good, but there are some items that we wanted to try to bring some awareness to you on where you might want to consider going to a reputable or a professional to handle due to some of the issues that might pop up in trying to service those items. So that's what we're going to go through today. But before I start, again, I just want to thank you guys for taking the time and also for the use of MSS. We value the relationship. So with that being said, I'm going to advance here. I just want to make sure, well, hopefully everybody sees the first picture that came up here. What do we do? I kind of threw this in here because Mover Specialty Service, maybe to some of you, it may be a little foreign, but we do not actually move homes. You guys do that. You guys move the people where they're going. We get called in when there's something a little bit crazy, if you will, or a little bit above and beyond the expertise and knowledge of maybe your move crew. So that's where we come in. We're nationwide. We handle services. Basically, we handle anything that your move crew doesn't feel comfortable handling. So if you run into a situation out there in a residence where a transferee has something you've never seen before, it does happen from time to time, instead of saying, you know, you're going to need to take care of that yourself, take a minute, say, let me check something, and then call Stevens or call us directly. Either we provide that service or we know someone who can at a high level so that you can actually provide that service and give the good experience to that customer. I'm going to start walking through some of these items. We narrowed it down to a number of them that we find you tend to have some claims issues with if they're not handled correctly. The first being the washer and dryer. What you have in front of you here is a standard front-load washer and dryer set. Below the machines, you'll see a little drawer cabinet. That's actually the pedestal. From time to time, your surveyor will go into a home. Yeah, there's a washer and dryer. Let's have it third-partied. It's a valuable or an expensive front-load washer and dryer. Be aware that there are sometimes drawer cabinets underneath them. The reason for that is that's actually an extra service that's required. It's called pedestal remove or pedestal replace. The coordinators or you may get into a situation where there's an additional cost you didn't account for. It actually has to be removed, those pedestals. They're aftermarket pieces. Your transferee, when they bought it from Best Buy or wherever they bought it from, they bought the machines, and then later on they could have purchased these drawer cabinets. It lifts the machine up a little bit higher, which is really nice, but you don't want to transport these items with the cabinets attached. The reason why is they're very thin metal. They're very good at holding the item perpendicular, upright, but during transit, if you load the machine, you're going to drop it on its corner or lean it on its side. It can bend and torque, and the cabinet can get destroyed, and then you're going to be in about $400 or $500 for replacement of those. And the machines themselves are very high efficient, and they're very expensive. Anywhere, I'm estimating $800 to $4,000 for a set. They could be more. So the cost to do that is the cost of a damage. So if you're currently doing these disconnects, good for you, but just be aware that there's a lot of things that can go wrong with them. MSS and companies like ourselves will do operations checks before we put our hands on it. We make sure that the machine is operating. It spins, agitates, and drains. There's nothing wrong with the cabinet. But more importantly, in addition to removing the hoses and capping the water lines at the home so that if a spigot is dripping a little bit, we also need to stabilize the drum. A lot of you may be aware of front-load washer kits that are required. There are alternatives out there as well, airbag kits. We don't recommend the use of airbags unless there's an emergency situation. So a company like MSS would install the OEM kit, the kit that's required to stabilize the drum for that specific machine. So if you've got surveyors going out there at homes, they see a front-load washer. The dryer's not really that much of a concern. The washer is. You need to know the make and model of the machine so that you can order the correct kit for it. The dryer, on the other hand, you do have electric and gas dryers. Electric dryers at Origin, no big deal. You pull a plug out, you remove the venting, and you're good to go. The gas dryer is the thing you really need to be concerned with. I'm not sure how you guys are handling those, but in certain states and cities and boroughs, you've got regulations on you need a licensed plumber to disconnect any gas appliance because you need to cap the line and make sure it's not leaking. At destination as well, you got to make sure the right tests are done to make sure there's no slow leaks and that you're also replacing the gas flex connector every time. It's a law. You can't take a chance on trying to reuse a gas flex connector.
Brian, you may not know, but our audience certainly knows that we prohibit our drivers from servicing any appliances at all.
Okay. All right.
Especially gas, but
Right.
any appliances at all. We don't want the liability, the responsibility.
Yeah.
We're not the experts, so we request that they go out for third parties.
Okay.
Now, some of the agents have third party, internally they have a third party service, so that works.
They may be handling it that way.
Yeah.
Well, great. Thank you for that. That makes a lot of sense. And I'm glad you're doing that. It's just I was a tech for 10 years on the road. I've dealt with this stuff directly, and it's amazing the things that can go wrong. So that's specifically the drum and doing a disconnection on the machine. One other service that's provided that you may be overlooking that's very important as well. Sorry, I jumped ahead here. These are some of the kits that are just some examples of what we'll see out there. Currently anywhere from like 50 to 60 different kits dependent upon make and model of the machine. You can't get them at Lowe's or Home Depot, so we have to be special ordered. So this is kind of what a company would do that handles this stuff for you. Installation of the kit is actually pretty important too. The 4 bolts that go into the back of the machine, you don't want to over-tighten them, torque them. You can break the plastic drum that's on the machine. And basically what you're doing is trying to keep that drum as stable as possible during transit while it's running down the road. Underneath that plastic drum is a very large piece of concrete that holds with the weight, holds it steady as it spins at real high, RPMs. So the kit at origin is important, but equally as important is removing that kit at destination. If a kit's still installed and they try to run the machine, it can cause damage as well because you need to have a certain amount of movement in there. One thing we didn't talk about was, of course, an operations check, as I mentioned before, is important, but draining the machine is pretty important as well. We do a winter service on these appliances, anything with water, a washer machine or an ice maker, where we remove as much water as possible so that if the water freezes and expands, it doesn't cause damage to the inner drum. So that's just an example of something else we do. But what you see here is wet floor. What we're finding and found over the years is these laundry rooms are on the 2nd and 3rd story of people's homes nowadays. So if there is a leak, something's damaged, and water starts to spray, it's not just in the basement going down a drain. It can go down through the wall, through the ceiling, into the next level, and cause major disaster. So the operations check at destination is equally as important at origin. These are just some examples of the bottom left is the dryer cord. Oftentimes, and I'm glad to hear that you're having us do the appliances because at destination, there's really no way for the origin surveyor to know that the destination residence is going to have a 3-prong outlet or a 4-prong outlet for the electric dryer. Electric dryers take 220 volts, so you need that extra thick cord, and they have special outlets in the home. So when you buy a dryer at Lowe's or Home Depot, it doesn't come with a cord. You actually have to buy the cord separate because it's based on what you have at your house. So oftentimes a dryer will have a 3-prong dryer cord on it. They'll deliver to destination. There'll be a 4-prong outlet box. That's when we make the call to Stevens to get authorization for a dryer cord swap. Our techs carry this as standard equipment on our trucks. There's electrical connections that are important to do correctly, otherwise you can electrocute yourself. 220 is very dangerous. 110 you can survive, 220 not so much. So these guys will hook those up on an electric dryer. The top right is just an example of a gas flex connector for a gas dryer. Ice makers, they as well have concerns with water. Many, many years ago I heard tale of these plastic containers that you'd fill with water and you put in the ice box. And then after about 20 minutes or so, you'd have these cubes, you put them in your drink, and it'd chill your drink. Now you've got these machines that actually make the ice for you. And in addition to that, you've got other areas where there's water as well. The bottom right picture is a reservoir where it dispenses the water out the front of the machine. That's filled with water. So if that water is not removed and vacuumed out, The water freezes and expands. It's going to cause major damage. The top left is just a filter. It has to be removed, shaken out, and then we usually will roll that in paper and put it in the crisper drawer. It should be replaced every 6 months by the transferee anyway, part of general maintenance. What you see here is the bottom right picture is in the back rear of the refrigerator. It's the ice maker solenoid. Some are large, some are small, depending on the other hoses that go out to work different functions. But the bottom left picture is your basic ice maker solenoid. The water comes in from the top, that metal, that copper tube. That gets disconnected. Actually, I'm sorry. The water comes in from the left side. It connects with the ice maker line, which you see at the top right. We take that connection and we put a cap on the line. What we do then next is we remove that ice maker solenoid from the back of the refrigerator, and we shake it out and we vacuum out as much water out of there, because that light blue area holds about a teaspoon of water, and it's got no room to go. So if that freezes, it'll break that piece as well. This is the resulting damage. Again, we want to get back to the reason why we're talking about this today is the reason for having us do these services. And as Judy alluded to, we're probably handling ice makers as well for you. And that's a good thing. This is an example of a slow drip after we installed, or someone installed, a ice maker. The drip behind the machine and hit the water that was underneath the hardwood, and it wicked underneath, and it sat there for several days, and then the hardwood just buckled. I mean, you're talking, I don't know, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 in repairs for floor, hotel, moving stuff out, temporary store. It's just insane. So
there goes your booking commission at least.
Yeah, for a while. Forever. All right, set appliances. Grandfather clocks. This is another service that we come across quite often. And again, this might be something that you're handling yourself. If you're using a clock specialist, they're doing what they probably need to do anyway. But it's interesting. Clock shops may not realize what we're doing with this clock. It's going into a truck. It's going to be moved a number of times. It's going to be put in storage. So a company like MSS actually does some extra packing to this thing because we know what's coming ahead. Again, the value of a standard grandfather clock, a Howard Miller or Sly, $800 to $6,000 or possibly more. Proper servicing on something like this. On the right-hand side picture, before you get into the workings, which is on the left. On the right, we got to remove the weights. We do an operations check. We don't want to touch the finish on the weights or the pendulum because the oils in your skin can oxidize and turn those things brown. So we either use paper or gloves. We crank the weights all the way to the top after we do the operations check to make sure it's working properly. We put foam blocks up there. We take the weights off. We mark them left, center, and right because each one weighs differently, and we pack them up separately. The pendulum then comes off, and with a longer 1x4, we wrap it to the board, making sure that the board is longer than the pendulum because the bottom has an adjustment screw and the top has a little hook on it. That's the basic service there, but then we open up the side panel. So if your surveyors are out there in residence and they don't know if this is one of those really intricate grandfather clocks, take off the access panels on the side and you can see. If you see what we're seeing here on the left-hand side here with all the hammers and chime rods and moving parts, that needs third-party servicing. If you look in there and there's a black box and it's got a battery in it, it's a quartz movement. You don't need to service that. But again, if you've got a pendulum and weights, you've got to be careful, make sure you remove them and pack them properly. Again, to scare some of you in the audience here, the value of some of these items. This grandfather clock on the bottom, on the right-hand side, is legit. It's in a customer's home at one point, valued somewhere between $1 million to $2 million. I don't know where it comes from. Well, actually, it's from the 1700s. So I always find this interesting. You walk into a customer's home and you ask them, is there anything you're concerned about? Nah, but they've got this $1 million clock in the corner of the room that they forgot about somehow. Once it becomes a claim, then they remember. So grandfather clock service is definitely something that I would feel and believe needs a specialist. So get that clock guy in there, make sure your local guy is doing it correctly, and if not, call on someone who knows what they're doing. Inventories, I mentioned before, making sure that whoever you're using is doing a full-blown inventory on anything that they're putting their hands on. What's the current state of condition? Are they taking photos of it before? Are they taking photos after? Was the item working? Was it not working? Those things. MSS actually, our technicians have this handheld technology where these documents are also not just automatically sent to MSS, but the transferee gets a copy as well. We're trying to CYA and make sure that we're not leaving ourselves open for an opportunity to buy a new washer machine or grandfather clock. Some other miscellaneous items that we come across that you guys have probably seen many times, multi-station weight equipment, treadmills, things of that nature. Basically, if it can't get out the doorway, it needs to be disassembled. The treadmill at the top right looks very basic. The issue that we have is that there are electrical lines, like electric wires that run from that control panel down to the motor. So if you have a helper that might be in the summer, and the driver's in the truck loading it, go disassemble that thing, and he takes the bolts off and pulls the arms up. You may set yourself up for an opportunity to buy a brand new treadmill for something that no one uses. It's like holding laundry every day. But what we do is, just to reassure you, and if we're not doing it and someone else is doing it, you don't need to disassemble these things completely. The object, again, is to get these things out of the home safely and back in the home with as minimal pieces as possible. So that weight equipment on the left, you might only have 3 sections or 4 sections, labeling A to A, B to B, with little stickers on the surfaces that you won't find that butt up against each other. Crating services, most of the people that are listening right now probably do their own crating, or you have a crating guy that does it for you. Again, we want to address the differences between some of the types of crates. You know, your basic crating should be open slat crating, which you see on the left, 1x4 constructed. It makes it a lot easier for you to build custom crates at residence by just carrying a bunch of 1x4 lumber. Cardboard line to keep dust and debris off of it. Even spacing on the boards. Up arrows are always very helpful because the orientation of some of these items are very important. You never want to load something that's flat. You don't know if it's glass or marble. If you lay it flat inside the load for a period of time, it can break. On the right is plywood crating. It's reserved, obviously, for very high-value items, maybe things going overseas internationally, or if you have a transferee that has expressed that the last time I moved, this thing got broken, you might want to opt for plywood because it gives the perception of a little bit more extra care. Irregular items, moose heads, deer heads, this duck on the left. You know, I mentioned about putting cardboard lining. Well, oftentimes what we want to do is we want to do shrink wrap so the driver can see what's inside it. Obviously, you see a wooden crate like you see over here on the left-hand side. If it has no indication what it is, you think, well, that thing's fine, just throw it in the truck. Or let's place it in the truck on its side, what have you. That duck on the left-hand side, you really don't want that lying on its side because you're only stabilizing it at the base, maybe. So that's the reason for doing the shrink wrap. We shrink wrap it around the sides and the top, leaving open air to come up from underneath in case the thing's still alive. In any event, some of the other items, the item on the right I'm not going to talk too much about, but we have to be careful in how you stabilize these items. Sometimes you need to screw them in from the back and actually mount them inside of the crate. Oil paintings are really a very big concern in the moving industry. I get questioned all the time. What do you do? How do you do it? What do you wrap it with? Our position is you don't want to wrap that oil painting with anything. You know, when you put that item inside a truck and it gets up to 120, 130 degrees inside the trailer, the surface of the oil painting becomes tacky. If something comes in contact with it, you're buying a new oil painting or you're going to try and repair something that's priceless. So what we do is we build the custom crate so it's an inch of spacing all around it on the inside. We put inch-thick foam. If the frame is not the most valuable piece, because sometimes that's the most value on an oil painting, and it's not flaking, we'll put foam on the top of the frame as well. Put some 1x4s across it. Put another 1x4 across the center so that the cardboard doesn't come in contact with the oil painting. And when you put cardboard in there, it allows room for air to flow around it as well. There's a little bit of gap around there. And we'll put up arrows, and that's the best way to really create an oil painting. You really don't want to put glassine or anything over it. I know a lot of art people like to say you got to put this around it, but you don't want anything to ever come in contact with the surface of the oil painting. If something's going overseas, actually, if you're just doing the origin service side and they don't need you to do destination for whatever reason, you might want to ask your transferee, are there any intentions of ever going overseas at any point in time? If they are, you got to make sure that the guy that's building the crates is certified for ISPM 15 requirements. They have to have a stamp. That stamp on the left-hand side, which is the HT and the US dash, there's a 3 or 4 digit number that we have that we've hidden there. But that's a certification stamp. So when those crates go to the loading dock, you move them to storage. 3 years later, they move their stuff separately to a dock that's going to go overseas, and they say, well, these crates weren't done properly. They're probably going to call you and ask you to pay to have them recrated. So make sure that they're doing the right things. Ask the question, are you going overseas? Make sure you've got the right people. MSS has techs that are certified to have the correct stamping, something that's pretty important. Pool table service, again, pool table companies are all over the place. Again, they're very good at disassembling, but I want to let you know that the cost sometimes can vary. Some pool table companies will try to upsell your customer, try to sell them a new felt, sell them something else. The experience may not go well if you use someone that you're not familiar with. Our pricing is standard across the U.S. We're very competitive, and I'm going to bring you through the process of disassembling very quickly. Removing the rails and the pockets, we take the hardware, we wrap them up and mark them as such separately. We then remove the felt, removing the staples, and if it's glued, we just pull the felt off. The felt can always be reused unless it's completely damaged. We do an inventory, as I said before. We'll bring the transferee over. You should be bringing the transferee over if you're doing this yourself. Make sure they're aware of pre-existing damage, because it's amazing what they don't know about their own stuff. Once we remove the felt, we always roll the felt. You never want to fold the felt. If you fold the felt, it can crease, and once it creases, if it's older, the creases may never come out, and now you're buying a new felt for your transferee. Once you've done this, we roll it with brown paper so if there's glue on it, it doesn't stick to the other side of the felt, make it useless. We also mark it so it's easy to find when you're getting ready. We put MSS Parts Box tape on it so it's easy to find. There are 3 slates, generally speaking, on most pool tables. Most pool tables you buy at a billiard place is what you're going to find. The ones that have one-piece slates are usually from a pool hall, you know, like the ones the coin-operated slots, but they're kind of rare. We'll slide the slates apart. Usually there's a series of pins that hold them in position so that they don't slide out, so you line them up. That's why you don't want to just lift up on them after you remove the bolts or the lag bolts that hold them to the frame. They get removed, put off to the side. If we're going to crate them, we're going to bring the crates in. At this point, again, we talked lately about wanting to make sure that the item gets out the door safely. We're going to remove the 4 legs here. You don't necessarily want to remove or disassemble that base completely because of a few things. The structural integrity of the base, you don't want to put it at risk. This space is designed to come apart, but again, if you take it apart, you're going to have 6 or 8 individual pieces that now are at risk of getting damaged or lost, mixed up in the load. So if it can get out the doorway safely and get in the doorway, keep it together. That pretty much covers a lot of the services. I kind of went quickly because I didn't want to take up too much of your time. But those are a number of the services. By all means, that's not the full gamut, but those are a few that we identified as items that might pop up during a move that you might want to consider having a professional handle for you. At this point, what I'd like to do is mention to you and show you very quickly a tool that MSS created based on feedback we'd received from move coordinators when there's that little bit of disconnect between the surveyor and when they lock in a job and they get it, what do they quote for these specialty services. So I'm going to quickly go through this quick quote tool. This is a tool that can be used on a handheld iPad, iPhone. It can be done on a laptop as well. And if anybody is interested, you can communicate back through Robin and Kate, and they can get them in touch with me, and I can get you guys set up at your own agency. You'll all have your own username and your own password. So that being said, I'm going to actually jump to another screen here. I'm jumping all over the place here, so bear with me. This is the quick quote tool. You think you can see it?
Yeah, they can see it. I'll just move this out of your way.
All right.
Just a minute.
So what we're going to do as an example, we're going to just do a dummy customer. So 7398 is the password that we have that stands for someone. And Michigan at Stevens Worldwide is going to allow that email to come to this screen here. So imagine for a moment that this is, John at Allen Moving or whatever the name of your company is, .com. That'll be your password. When you log in to the Quick Quote tool, on the screen, it actually looks a lot better on your handheld. It's just for demonstration purposes. Now, it'll say hello to you to let you know that we know who you are. When you scroll down on your iTouch, there's actually 2 areas you can click on. Service guidelines, and I'm going to go ahead and click there real quick once here. This is a tool that was designed to provide you guys information while you're in the home. If you're trying to talk to your customer and tell them that this grandfather clock requires an expert and that you're actually going to coordinate it instead of dumping on them to do it, you're actually going to coordinate setting that up, and they ask you, well, what's involved? Why do I need an expert? If you click on that grandfather clock, you can then click on Origin, and it will give you bulleted information on something to explain to the customer. This is what they're going to do. This is why. It explains step by step what's involved in the process at Origin. and also does it at destination as well.
That is a great resource, especially for, you know, the people doing estimates in the home, but when you have that call that they just want a quick quote and they say, oh wait, I have a grandfather clock, and you know, you can reference it right away and have those talking points. So
that's a good point. As I mentioned, you can use it on your desktop as well. So we have a number of services here. It's not all of them, but it's a good number, and it should, again, make your potential new customer feel comfortable and you guys being knowledgeable on the services that you're providing. So that is the service guidelines part of this thing. When you click the MSS logo up here, it brings you back to your main page again. You click on Get a Quote. This is where I think there's a lot of power for your sales staff out in the field. Again, if you have something that needs third-party servicing. All right, so there's a few required fields here. You have to pick an affiliate. For the examples here, we have a few different price schedules here with Stevens. Stevens 0 is like the lower price. So we're going to go ahead and click that. So you got to pick that price schedule. That's how you're going to get your pricing. We're only doing origin services on this job. You don't need to fill this in, but we do need a zip code. Because in certain areas of the country, we do have to charge a double trip charge, like in New York City and things of that nature. So now that you put that in, you're going to go to the Add Services portion, and you will just pick from here. Military, if it's a military order, you have to pick military only, and you have to pick the military affiliate, which was on the other page. So you might want to disregard the military if you're not doing military. If you're just doing COD type customers, you're going to pick just services here. So for this one, I'm going to pick the grandfather clock, if I could find. So I'm going to click on clocks, grandfather clock disassemble, and I'm going to pick a pool table. And the pool table, we're just going to disassemble. We're not going to crate display on this job. We're going to scroll down to the bottom. We're going to continue along. I'm actually going to add a crate just for the heck of it. Cool.
do you guys, does MSS require actual DIMs or?
Yeah, we're going to want the actual item DIMs. We don't want you guys to mark it up because this thing's going to calculate and actually add dimensions to it for the billable. So
Okay.
Just give us the actual dimensions, so thank you. Now this is for standard crating for a 60 by 40 marble tabletop. Doesn't necessarily need plywood, but if you want to, you would just click there. If it's international overseas, boom, right there. If you don't want us to bill you, you want us to bill that transferee and collect directly from them, that's when you pick COD. If you leave it blank, we're going to bill you, your agency, for this job. So I'm not going to add another crate. I'm not going to add a duplicate, although you could do another marble top for the same exact dimensions. I'm done with my crating. It brings you to your review screen. It just lets you know that you've chosen these items, and if for some reason you need to remove one, you hit the trash can, it's going to remove it. I'm not going to remove one, but if you click the trash can, it'll remove it from me. So there's your review screen, okay? You scroll down to the bottom, and when you click Email Quote, it's going to send the email back to you. So that's why it's important that we have your username. It has your email address, because when you're in the field, it'll come right back to you while you're in the customer's home. I'm going to go to my email now because I'm that customer that logged in, and I'm going to hit Send and Receive. It's usually within seconds. So there it is right there. I'm going to open it up. I'm going to open the attachment. Now you're at the customer's home. You open this thing up, and if you want to show the customer, you can. If you don't want to, obviously you don't have to. But there's your pricing for those services based on MSS. So if you use MSS, this will allow you to be able to maybe close a deal in a customer's home with accurate pricing and not have to go, oh my God, I totally misquoted that. Now we're in trouble. What are we going to do? What's also cool here is at this point, somewhere in my email, I can forward this to the move coordinator in my office and say, hey, I was just at the Johnson house. This is what I quoted. They have to think about it, but if we get the move, these are the services we need to set up with MSS. So that pretty much covers everything I wanted to go over with the services as well as the quick quote tool. I appreciate you guys taking the time to go over this with me.
Yeah, let's see if we have any questions here. If you do have any questions, please feel free to enter them into the question box here. I don't see any at this time. We'll just wait a minute. But I think that the quick quote is such a good tool for all of our agents to have, our salespeople, our PVOs. I mean, what a great resource.
Yeah, the actual information, the service guidelines section is also valuable. I mean, you can actually print, I don't know if you can print that out or not, but you can at least use it, let your staff review it as well. I mean, like, obviously, you know, if you're a transferee, they get the feeling that your staff understands not only the move, but also the specialty services in detail. It's just going to make them feel much more warm and comfortable in working with you.
Yeah.
And that actually is the address you would go to, quickquotes@mss1.com. But in order for you to be able to log in, I would actually have to make sure you're set up in our system, which is very easy. It's just an email that comes maybe to Judy and Katie here, which will then forward that information to me, and I can get in contact with you fairly quickly.
It looks like we do have a question. How do claims work? Do customers file with Stevens and we settle, or do they file with MSS?
They come in all different shapes, forms, and fashion. Usually, quite often, it'll be like the mover that'll let us know that there was a claim that we might be involved in. We always work hand in hand, whether it's with Stevens or you, the agent. You let us know. We work with you. Every situation's a little different. Sometimes we need to split something, or we can't determine who's at fault, or I can tell you we will definitely, we take liability on anything we put our hands on within reason, obviously. If there's tire marks from the tractor trailer over top of a crate, we might have to have a discussion there. But sometimes the transferee might call us. But if a transferee calls us directly on something, we will notify you to let you know that they brought this to our awareness. Now, that's a claim. Sometimes there's things that may go wrong during the move that don't really become a claim. We try to send that tech back immediately. If someone calls and says, your tech was just here, there's water that's leaking on my floor, or if you get that call us immediately so we can call the tech who just left residence. We want to send that same guy back so he can adjust and fix what it is. There's no additional cost, obviously, for anybody because we want to try and not make that a claim. So if you are made aware, let us know immediately. Open dialogue is the best.
Another one from Nick at Colden. What type of communication or follow-up do we have and our shippers get using your service? So what type of follow-up and email notifications? I mean, what is your...
Well, there's different areas that, like, so when you place an order with MSS, like if you place one directly with our company, you immediately get, if you're placing it through our web portal, which is the way you place it electronically, you'll get an immediate order acknowledgement, which will spit back to you into your email all the information, all the details on what you placed with us with pricing. So you'll have that as a document in your inbox that you can refer to once the job's been complete. You can match up the invoice afterward. Once we receive an order, within 24 to 48 hours of receipt of the order, we contact that transferee to say, hi, we're MSS working on behalf of Stevens Van Lines. We've been requested by your mover to come out and service these 2 or 3, 4 items. And then if we need more clarification, say it's a front load machine, we might say, I noticed that you have a front load machine. Do you happen to have the front load kit still? If they do, then great. If they don't, we ask the make and model. So we go over that information. That's 24 to 48 hours within receipt of the order. 24 hours to 48 hours prior to providing the service, you'll tell us the date you want us to go do the service. We will then reach out to the transferee again to reconfirm that everything is still set. We still need our services. And then within 24 hours, like with less than 24 hours, our tech will then reach out to the transferee to confirm and commit to a time and appointment. Once our tech confirms a time, you will also get a customer note, an email note that will say, appointment confirmed between 10 and 12 on this day. That'll come in your inbox as well. And then when we've completed service, you'll get a job done note, which will say job has been completed. That'll come to your inbox, which allows you then the opportunity to pick up the phone and say, hey, Mr. So-and-so, I understand MSS just left your residence and did your washer, dryer, and ice maker. How'd everything go? So there's a lot of touch points.
Another question, can MSS accommodate services on load and delivery date?
Actually, most of the service requests we get, because there's TVs, washers, and beds and things, are usually on load and delivery date. Obviously, when you've got a lot of crating, you're going to want to have crating done maybe a few days before because items might get added on, things might become a little more complex, and there's only a certain amount of time to do it. But obviously, like you've got a washing machine, we might do that day of load. What's very helpful is to let us know when you place orders what the weight of the shipment is. Because if it's a small shipment, we know we need to be out there first thing in the morning. If it's a very large shipment, we might have more time. Delivery as well. If it's a very big shipment, we may get there and the things aren't off the truck. one good thing is if there's third-party service items, so they're crated, washer, dryer, ice maker, if there's any way to have the driver put those things on the load last because they're the first things that come off, it makes it easier for us to get there on time, get the job done, and move on. The last thing we want to do is have to try to charge you for a return trip charge because we got there, we couldn't do the service, but the appointment was confirmed. We don't want to charge you if we don't have to, but sometimes we have to pay these techs to drive to a residence. So loading them last is helpful.
Another question in regards to the travel time, with Quick Quote, will the quote also include a distance charge for remote areas?
Well, you know what, it's interesting. Distance charges, MSS does not charge for distance. Every once in a while, we might have a move coordinator at MSS reach out to you and say, oh my gosh, is there any chance that we might be able to get additional for travel because we're sending the guy 250 miles one way to service a washer, which happens quite often. But MSS, as a nationwide, believes that if we're providing service at fixed rates, if you guys can't get that charge, we can't force you to do it. So we're going to do the job. We're just going to take it on the chin. Hopefully that's less times than a lot of times, you know. But every once in a while we might ask you. But there's not additional charges that are going to pop up that if you've already quoted your customer that we're going to expect you to pay. We just try to work with you. If there's anything you can do to help us out when we need it, great. If not, we understand.
Another question, these are great questions. If MSS crated the item but does not do the uncrating, how does that affect the liability when it comes to damage?
It just muddies it up a little bit.
Right.
I mean, we're always going to stand behind our work. If it's obvious that something was done at origin, the best way to identify and remove those opportunities for you to point the finger somewhere else, you really do want the same company, whether it's MSS or anyone else, if they're doing origin, have them do destination. It just makes it more simpler. You guys have all been in this business probably a very long time, and sometimes the transferee says, I'll take care of something. They drop it. Nobody's around. They blame it on you guys. So if you can have us do destination, have us do it. I know costs are a factor, but again, as I said before, we're always willing to work with you. We just wanted the opportunity to have an intelligent dialogue with you and say, where are we at with this? What do we need to do? What do we feel is the best way to get this thing resolved? What we find oftentimes is like, look, let's take care of the customer, fix whatever needs to be fixed, and then we can always have an intelligent dialogue afterward. If we find out something's fixed, we're not going to say, oh, well, it's fixed, we're not paying for it. We know that there's future work. The relationship's very important. So we're never just going to say, nope, nope, we're going to work with you.
Try to talk your, when you're out there selling, try to let the transferee know that if it needs to be serviced at one end, it also needs to be serviced at the other end. What we don't want to have, and happens frequently, is a driver gets out there and the transferee has said to the sales guy, I'll uncrate it. And then they want the driver to do it. Now the driver is assuming responsibility for the original service provider, the hauler, and that's not fair to the driver. So if you can, you know, let your transferees know that if it needs service at origin, it's going to need service at destination, and go ahead and set it up at the time.
And use those selling points that MSS does have available to the key points of to why it does need to be serviced at origin and destination. So you have that as, like Judy was saying, another selling point.
And one other thing for your salespeople, which I think in the COD market, I know everything's like cost conscious. You really want everything for a very low price. We get it. But what I believe is probably happening, because they're getting three or four more bids, including yours, I don't believe the other movers they're selling the origin service. But if you mention to the transferee, listen, you got a pool table and a grandfather clock, we can set that up for you at destination as well. You're going to need it serviced. Instead of dumping it on the responsibility of the transferee, the transferee is going to get there and go, great, now what am I going to do? They don't know anybody in the area. They're going to go through Yahoo, Google, call people that aren't background checked. They're not going to know. They're going to try and upsell them. It's going to be an unpleasant experience. They may not mark or score Stevens very high on that. But if you at least offer it, when they go to the other movers and they don't offer it, they're going to think, wow, Stevens really cares. So you might want to actually offer that, because the price at destination for a lot of these services sometimes is a lot less expensive than the origin service. So it's really not going to necessarily break the bank. But some of the items that you'd be calling us on, they might be willing to pay that extra money to ensure it's done correctly.
Good. All right. Well, we don't have any other questions. I think we got those all answered. Brian, thank you very much for taking the time to come up here and spend some time with both our claims department, both of our MOVE coordinators in government traffic, and the MOVE Center, as well as operations. So again, thank you, and thank you to everybody who joined us today on the call. Our next webinar is May 21st, and it is going to be on your reputation, or the perception. Reputation is perception. So that will be at 12 o'clock on May 21st. Thank you.